We'll move right on to session number 2, and that is our roundtable discussion. Tele-mentoring and tele-consultation, support for primary healthcare in remote areas. As I said before, there will be a time at the end of the roundtable discussion for you to ask questions. I will invite the members of the panel onto the stage one at a time. We have 7 members of the panel from 6 different countries with us today. First of all, I would like to invite onto the stage Ms. Ludmila Zilevich, Head of the Department of Primary Healthcare at the Ministry of Health of the Republic of Belarus. Ms. Zilevich will be speaking through an interpreter today. Please sit down. Next, I'd like to invite back onto the stage Mrs. Ivi Norme, Deputy Secretary General for Health of the Ministry of Social Affairs of Estonia. Our next guest on the panel is also from Estonia, Mrs. Diana Ingarainen, Head of Estonian Society of Family Doctors. Representing Finland today, we have Mr. Aulis Rantamuotio, Chairperson of the Board of South Ostrobothnia Health District. From Latvia, I'd like to welcome Mr. Eriks Mikitis. He is Director of the Healthcare Department at the Ministry of Health of the Republic of Latvia. From Lithuania, we have Ms. Justina Janusevičienė. She is Head of Healthcare Services Acceptability and the Accessibility Monitoring Unit at the Ministry of Health of Lithuania. And last but not least, from Sweden, we have Mr. Per Mosebu, Director of the... Wait for it. Director of the Centre for E-Society and the Swedish Association of Local Authorities and Regions. So, welcome again to all our panellists. We have 6 questions or topics to discuss today, or this morning, and everybody has a chance to answer every question if they wish. We'll start with the first subject, the first question, and that is, do you consider ICT solutions such as teleconsultation and telementoring to be potential or suitable tools for retaining professional competence and avoiding brain drain in rural primary health services in your country? And we can start from this end, so we can start with Per Mosebu. What do you have to say about this?
I would say absolutely, and I would actually elaborate that both when it comes to the brain drain of the healthcare professionals, and also, of course, the professionals actually living in these areas. If we begin with the healthcare professionals, we can see that we have a trend towards more patient power, and you have different kind of quantified things that enables the person to track their own health data. And if you want to have a healthcare professional to actually be able to be a part of the trialogue that actually consists between the primary care professional and the specialist, the primary care role will be much more of a coach in that sense. I think the primary care health professional role will become much more interesting if we can be part in this trialogue, apart from today. And then in a bigger sense, this is also very much, when we have the urbanization trend, this is very much about the democratization of healthcare, that we actually can get good healthcare out in rural areas, because when it gets a bigger difference between the healthcare in rural areas compared to the rest, it also drives the brain drain in general, which makes it less important to be there. I would say that the main trend, when we get more patient power to actually be a part of that, is the most important part.
Okay.
Yes, I would strongly agree, my colleague, and I would say that it might be an appropriate tool to tackle both brain drain and unwillingness to employ oneself in rural areas. Well, but this measure should be applied in complex with sustainable financing, with improvement of infrastructure, with improvement of working and living conditions of general practitioners in rural areas. Well, the demographic morbidity data show that very great inequities between very well inhabited cities and remote areas. So I strongly believe that ICT measures such as telementoring and teleconsultation could encourage GPs working in remote areas. Well, and it's very important to emphasize, as it was already mentioned, that the relation between a patient and doctor, which was long-term driven by Hippocratic oath-based paternalism, now is shifting because of the autonomy of the patient, and which implies a great pressure upon a doctor with some risky solutions of setting up diagnosis, of deciding on procedures, on other medical interventions. And now we observe such phenomena as a defensive medicine, because general practitioners are in a risk of some prosecution because of their decision and their ability to consult to someone. So ICT technologies are one of those measures which could absorb those risks and fears and assure the solution of many acute problems at primary level. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. We can move along in order with this one.
I agree with my colleagues, but I would like to say IT technologies is not only one tool for helping our patients in remote rural areas. At first, and also it's the best way if physician is so competent and it is available to reach this in time when it's necessary for patient. But if it's not in all places, in all situations possible, we need some technologies to help that. And our technologies, always teleconsultation, also information center, it's some have to realize some some social problems, accessibility, availability, also quality of care, consultation. We understand our brain is quite limited and we need some other additional information. And it's one tool and we have to support and put these technologies in our development.
Mr. Antamortio.
In Finland, I think that teleconsultation and telementoring are common methods in central and university hospital level. But in primary healthcare, there are newer methods. In our area, Dr. Rapita has her own presentation in the afternoon. He has experience on local level during this piloting. And I think that teleconsultation and telementoring are perhaps not key issues in avoiding brain drain, but they are still important part of it, but not what is it is.
Thank you. Absolutely agree. And for us, for Estonian Family Association, this was much more than only these two things in this project. That in Estonia we don't think anymore why, but how and how to do this better. And this was very good for us.
If I may to add to my colleague, and as much I know what happens in practical life, the family doctors and nurses are very open to use for training programs and for training opportunities, all kind IT solutions, and it is a very effective way to participate in training programs, because you haven't any need to travel in the training center, and you can average your working time and training programs in very suitable ways, and in your own needs, what doctors and nurses in their working practice need. If we are talking about brain drain, it's a more tricky question, because our situation is that we depend which policy and manpower planning situation that our Finnish colleague had, and I think there is quite interesting possibility for cooperation and for cross-border projects that already some specialties use today this possibility that Estonian specialists consult and via IT solutions the other countries, and it is possible that also we can use the resources of other countries for our own purposes.
Thanks.
Действительно, я хочу сказать, что телемедицинская консультация – это инструмент, который мотивирует нашего врача практики, который находится в географической удаленности, чувствовать себя комфортно и уверенно там, где он находится.
I'm absolutely sure that the in-house resources, telementoring and teleconsultation systems are one of the tools which will help to support general practitioners and doctors in remote areas.
Я абсолютно согласна с коллегами, но хотела бы сказать, что этот аспект еще касается и самого пациента, потому что пациент тоже получает выгоду из этих технологий.
I also would like to say that we were concentrating on the doctors, but I would like to mention the interest of the patient, who also were covered by these systems.
Так как врач имеет возможность поставить более быстро диагноз, более качественно и принять более правильное решение для того, чтобы достигнуть главного выздоровления нашего пациента.
The doctor has new possibilities to render more emergency aid and services to the patients. It means that fast diagnosis process and fast treatment process decisions can be carried out as it is necessary at the moment.
Мы считаем, что телемедицинские технологии и дальше должны развиваться, и мы должны применять их в дальнейшей практике не только как мотив для того, чтобы закрепить наши кадры, но и для того, чтобы улучшить качество и профессионализм наших врачей.
I would like to mention that it is important not only to motivate the professionals from the rural areas to work in the places, but to pay attention to the accessibility and the importance of the treatment process that we render to the patients.
Okay, thank you everybody for those comments. A very positive start to the debate. Definitely potential and definitely suitable tools, but more needs to be developed. We'll move straight on to our next topic for discussion. Is there political will and are there existing strategies for ICT implementation in healthcare in your country? So this is two different questions in one, and you can answer one of them or both of them as you see fit. So, is there political will? Are politicians actually talking about these things already, and do they want to make the changes? And are there strategies already for ICT implementation? Mr. Rantamuotio, would you like to start us off on this subject?
In Finland, we have lots of ongoing discussions about these topics in national and regional levels. And my understanding is that we have good political will for ICT implementation in healthcare systems. Our Minister has told that we have also resources in our state for this purpose.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mikitis, would you like to speak?
About political will, it's not so simple answer to that. I think it's just support in ideological and another in some realistic support. In our country, we are not concentrated to just technologies implemented. Our idea is in financing some services, and ICT technologies is just tool to help realize the technologies. About other political will examples. Now we have prepared some short-term political document we call the Climate Infrastructure Development Plan for 2014-2016, and in that plan we have 3 courses of action. One is availability and strengthening and accessibility of services. Another is quality of services and safety of services for primary care. Third one is providing information to patients, and also important increased involvement and competence of patients. And in this action plan we include also some activities for increasing using of ICT technologies and ICT resources, how to realize our targets. And of course, the mind in primary healthcare, we can't talk only about technologies and doctors, and we put so important issues to a team of family doctor. Not only doctor and computer and patient. The team is very important thing, and many things realizing the technologies is just support for team. And in that case, more time for physician, qualities, very high qualified job.
Okay, who would like to talk next about this subject? Okay, Per Morseby.
Thank you. I would say that Sweden very much has what I would refer to as a first-generation strategy for national e-health, where we look upon the existing health process and see how we can use ICT to make that process better. It's everything from journal data to how we work together. But what we haven't been touching is that when we get these types of technologies like telemedicine, it would mean a paradigm shift of how to work and how to organize healthcare. And that's actually the next step in that, which is where I see a big need to actually formulate that strategy. And if we look at the 20 counties that are responsible for healthcare in Sweden, you can see that the trends of specialization is making it actually harder and harder. For instance, we only have one place where you, of course, where you do open heart surgery, but specialization as a trend is affecting all these counties. So you can see that that strain will mean that we need different ways to organize. So we do not have maybe the same kind of county limits for all types of healthcare. We have to cooperate, and then these types of telemedicine tools, it's a very good way to do that. But it needs a separate strategy and a separate kind of work to make that happen. But it's coming.
Okay, it's coming, so there aren't strategies at the moment, but they are coming soon.
Second generation.
The next generation. Okay, thanks.
We do have political will, I say, and we do have national strategies in Lithuania. We have national ICT strategy for information society, which defines all the mainstreams of using ICT in all the spheres of national life, and e-health is one of them. We have a national strategy of e-health until 2050, and now we have a commitment to prepare a draft document of national health strategy, which would unify all the financing sources towards health sector until 2020. So we consider e-health not an ICT as well, not as aim itself, but as one of the complex measures of health, and one of the measures while making health budgets secure.
Okay, thank you.
In Estonia, we have a very big village. E-health is in Estonia a little wonder, I think, and we have e-recept, but what we don't have is 100% belief. Doctors believe that we partly do this helps us.
And also what we have very high expectation from side of population and politicians, and it's a little tricky situation that we have to change our, first we have to change our communication strategy, and very clear we have to define which nationwide services are already implemented, which services are in pilot phase, and which services we plan in the future. And the absence of a very clear message have little made the communication around e-health projects and possibilities little such kind our population have wrong picture about what is the real possibilities, and we need for these strategies and clear vision what we have about the implementation of e-health possibilities and services, also very clear communication strategy.
В Республике Беларусь существует государственная программа электронного здравоохранения.
In Belarus, we have the national strategy program for in-health.
Эта программа предназначена именно для развития медицинских технологий.
And part of this program is concentrated on the in-health medical services.
Конечно, в первую очередь вопрос развития технологий, информационных технологий коснулся врачебной практики, первичного звена и тех врачей, которые находятся в сельской местности.
Of course, the first center of concentration was doctors in rural areas, and of course the general practitioners in rural areas.
Однако в дальнейшем мы планируем развивать телекоммуникационные технологии с большой осторожностью.
But further, we would like to develop IT technologies, but trying to be as much here of this as possible. We should be careful with this.
Как правило, мы всегда отрабатываем в небольших пилотах развития данных коммуникаций.
As a rule, first we have trial pilots before the implementation.
И основная цель – это телекоммуникации и телетехнологии как дополнение к работе врача, а не замена его контакта с пациентом.
As a rule, it is an additional facility for the doctors, but not the replacement of the communication between the doctor and the patient.
Поэтому, наверное, не так много дискуссий по этому вопросу, потому что все боятся, что технологический уровень это все технологично заменит живое общение.
That's why there are so many discussions about this, as always we are afraid of IT technologies replace the eye-to-eye contact between people.
Поэтому так важно было работать в этом проекте, чтобы найти рациональное изменение, положительное развитие телекоммуникационных технологий именно в первичной сети.
That is why we did our best to find good solutions and good ways of collaboration and find the optimal and rational solutions how we can support the doctors and the patients.
Okay, thank you everybody for your comments there. As we would expect with 6 different countries, we have different situations in different places. The political will seems to be quite strong everywhere, but the level of strategies is obviously different in different places. Okay, our next question. You could answer very quickly with a yes or no, but it'd be nice if you give us a little bit more information than that. Is there large-scale deployment of teleconsultation and telemonitoring in your country already? Shall we begin with the situation in Belarus?
Полностью покрытие различными видами информационных систем всего здравоохранения.
The whole healthcare system in Belarus is covered with various types of technologies.
Наиболее активно оно используется в обучающей практике по всей республике.
The main option we use these systems with are connected with the educational process.
И тот проект, который был отработан в рамках нашего общего проекта, позволит нам развить технологии на уровне обучающей практики.
And these pilot territories and pilot projects that we carried out during IT will help us to develop the systems in the sphere of primary healthcare.
Проблема, с которой мы столкнулись, так как Беларусь представляет 7 регионов,
there will be some problems as we are represented by 7 international regions.
это достаточно разная программа, существующая в этих регионах. Поэтому было принято решение о унификации программ и возможности соединения их в общую республиканскую программу.
As all the regions have their own programs, now there is a good will and a great will of the politicians to unite these programs into one strategic document.
Определенные лидеры, которые всегда торопятся, но мы стараемся, чтобы достаточно равномерно шли регионы в своем развитии.
Of course, there are other leaders in implementing these technologies, but we are always careful with this, and we would like our specialists to work with the technologies step by step.
Okay. Who would like to comment next?
Some specific question about teleconsultation and telemonitoring. I have to say about that, telemonitoring is not so implemented in Latvia now. There are some examples in universities, students in maybe for residents who are working in countryside hospitals and communicate with professors and education staff in school, but it's not so wide, it just comes out. If we talk about consultations, in this Springfield ID project, Latvia colleagues participate in this primary health doctors and consultation with specialists. Also, there are some projects in cardiological area, also family doctors and cardiologists communicate exactly in tele-ID. Also some endocrinology projects, but that's only projects, it's not implemented in our field. But in reality, for many years, there are some teleconsultation in another area, in diagnostics, for example, X-ray and some functional diagnostic field, and also in oncology and in some emergency situations when colleagues from university hospitals consultate physicians in countryside hospitals and decide about tactics and making decisions afterwards for that. It is that.
In Finland, video connections are widely spread throughout Finland, especially in secondary healthcare. I think that about 15 years we are using methods. And one example is specializing doctors distance training between universities and hospitals or health centers.
Okay, thanks.
I may add some information from Estonian side. We are preparing to answer to this question correctly in the next time. And now we are carrying out a specific survey with our partners, and we try to collect all the information about the usage of these possibilities in our system, and also we expect from this survey to receive good ideas what are the possibilities for the future. And also we use during this survey results of Green Care IG project results, and it's very supportive.
Thanks.
Well, Lithuania has implemented some really good innovative initiatives in teleconsultation. It's now under implementation of several nationwide projects in telemedicine. But as far as we come to telemetry, there's still much work has to be done. As we have an order of ministry which refers to the delivery, provision, and reimbursement of teleconsultation services. We do not have that order in telemetry so far, so much work has to be done.
We also have promising projects. I was just looking at one of the promising projects up in Västerbotten that actually had a broader scope when it came to teleconsultation where the patient was involved, and also the possibility to have ultrasound in cardiology. And I think my colleague from Belarus has a very good point that we're afraid that we will lose the eye contact and maybe lose the patient's contact. But I really think that this can increase the patient focus, and that the primary care professionals can be much more the coach that are part of the process, so that the person is not actually someone being shipped around in the healthcare system between different institutions, which will be a very, very good thing that can happen out of this. But when it comes to large-scale deployment in Sweden so far, I would say no. On the telemetry part, we have a project for that will be large-scale, but we still have to go large-scale all the way.
Okay. Thanks. So we see that there are some interesting projects, and this is something that's growing, but large-scale deployment generally not in use yet. Okay, now we come to something which is always an important subject, and that is money. Financial aspects. What are the potential cost savings and benefits of using ICT, teleconsultation and telementoring? Obviously, it's a lot easier to convince people to develop these methods if we can tell them that this is going to save us money. So, what are those potential cost savings and benefits? Could anybody give us some ideas? Would you?
Well, I think it's a very complicated question because it is always politically nice to say that some initiative will save us money. But as long as we come to ICT, we always come to very big and hot debates. Does ICT gives us actual savings? I think today we should not talk about money first. We should talk about preserving such values as quality, availability of services, and accessibility to certain service locations.
Okay. Yeah.
In Finland, I think that we have so large country, time saving is very important. These are also money savings, and doctors have more time for patients' work. And I think that we can also get new possibilities in information very good methods.
Okay. Yep.
Just a very short comment was that this cost savings and benefit very much depends on quality, implemented technology, and which stage implementation is and how broad implementation in reality is. But we have to keep in mind very simple thing. As a doctors is the most expensive resource in healthcare. But I see technologies from day to day are costing less and less and less. And if we share some duties from human work to technologies, it must be more efficient as a result of that.
Okay, there could be a danger this technology won't be very popular with doctors then if this is going to eliminate the work. But no, an important point.
Yes, this is still the question, but what we saw in Estonia, we have for GPs possibility take e-referral letter for specialists. I am family doctor and I can take e-referral letter, then this specialist gives all this for patients before this visit. And what we saw that the cost effect there was patients' time and money for transport, and one visit was less than usual.
Yes, that's an important point to consider. It's not just money saved from the part of the taxpayer, but also the user as well, the patient saving time, so saving money. Okay, yeah?
Знаете, когда говорит о финансовых затратах, то мы всегда считаем прямые затраты.
When we're speaking about the financial expenditures, we usually think about the direct expenditures.
Но когда мы говорим о тех целях, которые мы достигли, они намного выше.
But when we start speaking about the goals that we achieved during our missions,
потому что мы сокращаем время, уменьшаем транспортные расходы и улучшаем качество и доступность.
We improve the quality, we shorten the time for rendering medical services.
Выигрывает пациент и выигрывает страна, потому что она получает здорового человека.
The country is the winner because the patient receives fast treatment as he is in need of this.
Поэтому, когда мы говорим о экономических затратах, здесь очень много дискутировать на эту тему, что же все-таки во главу угла. Есть затраты, на которые надо идти.
Speaking about the expenditures, we usually are careful with this, but still we should think of what we should pay for and to be efficient and rational in expenditures.
Так как здравоохранение всегда самая благородная цель для здоровья человека, то достаточно легко увидеть позицию выделения финансовых средств.
As the healthcare is a very actual and hot issue among politicians, it is not so difficult to convince the politicians to invest the budget into the healthcare system.
Потому что это в первую очередь инвестиция в здоровье.
Because firstly, this is the investment into the health of the nation.
Do we have any other comments on this issue?
I'll just add one small part. Much has been said by my colleagues, but and especially the part that it's very, very complex to count on this and actually see what kind of savings are to be made. But if we agree upon that, we will only be able to reap the benefits of a more lean way of doing this, saving the time for the patient, etc. We will need a digital-based infrastructure, so to speak, and we will need digital journals and standards on how to communicate together. So that kind of part of the package, you need really a political will to dare to go all the way for that. And it's very hard to calculate exactly the benefits of that platform.
Right. Okay, and we'll have an opportunity to ask questions about all of these subjects, of course, at the end of the discussion. Okay, our next subject for discussion is what are the necessary supporting factors for the implementation of teleconsultation and telementoring in your country or in your region. So, we've talked about political will already. What other things do you think are important to implement these methods? Shall we hear from Estonia first?
I think it's very good possibility to continue discussion with previous questions about financial savings. I think one motivator is financing, and I think we are in quite lucky situation that our social insurance fund has supported and financing all these new services and e-consultation service, and it's one main motivator in our country, for example.
Okay. So has it been a big financial investment so far?
If we are comparing with total health budget, they are, and the budget of EF for implementation and for development EF project, it's a tiny part of the health budget, but it's why I am describing this as lucky situation, all stakeholders and decision makers who have the power to support or to take decisions about financing e-health services, they are very open and very keen about these new possibilities and innovation and IT solution.
Okay.
Well, I would say that the key factors would be sustainable financing, broad and nationwide deployment, mutual recognition of professionals, collaboration, not rivalry, and consciousness and enlightenment of patients.
Okay, quite a few ideas put succinctly, yeah.
I think that the long distances, as I told earlier, long distances in Finland require us to develop these methods. We need good data networks. We have in some areas, or also in rural areas, fiber networks. It is quite a new system. I hope that it is coming in positive area. And positive attitude is important. I think that attitudes are becoming better and better.
Thanks.
I would like to add some things. My colleague talked about financial support, and it is important, especially in the implementing stage. Just some additional finance, we are doing that. Also, should be legally formulated all possibilities for some teleconsultation, some responsibility, and some other things. For implementing, very important is involving medical professionals in the first stage of project. It's not only technicians and IT specialists who do that, but without medical professionals, it could be implemented many mistakes. And also, if we are talking about teleconsultation, one important competence of professionals who are consultants.
Just in elaboration on that, I think in many ICT projects in the public sector, we overlook the fact that the ones working with it really need to understand and have competence and believe that it works. So that's really the part that we have to have a competence program so that when the system is implemented, both the primary care health professionals, the specialists, need to understand and believe in that it really works and see the benefits. And if you miss that, then typically the systems will not be used properly and it won't work. So that part is very important.
Okay, and
надо обучить и дать инструмент, который позволит этой системе работать оптимально.
I totally agree that first we should educate the people to use these technologies.
Поэтому отработка самого инструмента является очень важной.
It is very important to work out this tool.
Иногда врачи не знают, какие возможности предоставляют им эти технологии. И только ставя задачи перед технологом, они могут найти компанию.
Sometimes doctors do not know about the facilities and about the possibilities, options of the programs and software that is used. So that's why we should think about the cooperation between IT technologists and doctors.
Поэтому, кроме отработки обучающих программ, очень важно то информационное поле, которое предназначено и для врачей, и для пациентов, о том, что такие технологии позволяют им улучшить контакт.
We should always think about the information surrounding the support both the doctors and the patients, not only one side of it.
Поэтому, наверное, очень важны первые шаги позитивные, когда мы принимаем эту программу важно. С нашей стороны умеем убеждать других в этом и учим других пользоваться этим, чтобы наше дело, как говорится, не погибло в самом зародыше.
It is important not only to educate, but to concentrate on the cooperation and professional support of the specialists. Because if we not support the specialists, our mission will fail.
Yes, I very agree that not only do some information system, but teach doctors and nurses to use this.
Okay, as we've heard, there's an awful lot of things we have to get right before we can have widespread implementation, so we have a lot of work ahead of us. A lot of different issues. Our final question for this morning, and obviously for this project it's a very important question because we've had a lot of transnational collaboration during this project. Do you see national transnational collaboration potential in ICT implementations? And do you have transnational or national collaboration at the moment? So, how can we work together? Yeah.
Вы знаете, это очень хорошее направление, это я считаю, потому что, конечно, должно быть сотрудничество за пределами республики.
Of course, this approach is very critical and important for us because the collaboration should be not only inter-country, but outside the country and international country.
Такое направление у нас уже существует в республике, когда наши республиканские научно-практические центры и академия постдипломного образования используют возможности телеконсультирования со своими коллегами за рубежом.
Of course, we do have such experience in working with other countries and representatives from other countries in terms of telementoring and teleconsultations of the doctors and professionals. For example, the participants are the National Republican Scientific and Practical Medical Centers and also the Academy of Postgraduate Education, who do support the specialists of primary healthcare also.
Также у нас существует опыт, когда мы имеем возможность пригласить наших коллег на нашу конференцию, на телеконференцию, для того, чтобы продискутировать по тем или иным вопросам и узнать опыт применения наших коллег. Это очень важно направление.
It is also important, and we do invite our colleagues from the neighboring countries to our conferences and teleconferences, because the importance of sharing the experience is quite actual for all the countries, especially developers.
Поэтому эти технологии позволяют нам не только уменьшить наше расстояние, но практически вообще не зависит от того, где мы находимся. Это очень важно для профессионалов, потому что коллега профессионально всегда пойдет, поддержит. Это для нас общение является очень важным инструментом и для нашего профессионального коммуникации.
It doesn't really matter where the professional is. With the help of IT technologies, we feel no distance and no borders for this. And it is very important when the specialists support each other by means of new technologies. I think that this will be our future.
We also see very big potential, and we have a high expectation for new future starting exchange health information with our neighbor countries. And as much I know, there are some ongoing preparation works that we plan in the near future to start some pilot project with Finland, but also we are open for collaboration with Sweden and Latvia and other countries. But also we see there is also space for improvement in our country. We have some good examples about collaboration between hospital and ambulance team and private care services providers, but there is space for improvement or collaboration between hospitals. All hospitals in our countries are state in a state. They are independent legal bodies and not very open to collaborate always to each other. And also collaboration between primary care providers and hospitals.
I saw that we have practical needs to do this more.
I think that both national and transnational collaboration are very important. We have good examples for it, and also e-health coalitions. We have presentations where e-health coalitions network develops e-health collaboration between Baltic Sea Region countries over a year's time.
About national collaboration, we discussed previous 5 questions today. If we talk about international and transnational, I would like to mention last year implemented European Union directive for the shortly called cross-border directive, the railway movement for patients from another European Union countries. And in that context, there are European and Netherlands network and competence centers for specific diseases and specific treatment and for some competences. And I would like to say not potential for cooperation, but it is only just necessary tool for that, because we can't send patients for specific competence center without information about this patient before sending that. But we have to be also we have to look to our information very careful, because it's very important to know about data quality, about data availability, and also about security of the data.
I would say absolutely. In Sweden, on a national level, the cooperation and collaboration when it comes to ICT questions has been increasing every year. It's continuing to increase. That's a very solid trend. But also when it comes to international exchange and help with diagnostics from other countries, that's increasing. But I would say that it's a natural involvement in this specialization that we will move also towards other types of interchange and collaboration, especially with telemedicine and different types of interchange. And let's not forget that I think it was the Vice President of the US when he went to China and held a speech. We had a real-time translation from English to Mandarin. So if we're looking at like a 5-year time frame, we'll also have much better language support that actually makes it much easier also in Europe to have these types of collaboration.
Well, we have 29 national projects in Lithuania under implementation. And I think it's the best example of nationwide collaboration between public administration bodies and hospitals. We also have a wide broad extent of collaboration of our hospitals, scientists, universities, associations within international field of innovation.
Okay, thank you. Right now I'd like to say thank you to all our panellists for your contribution so far. In a moment we'll have a chance for people to ask questions. Quite a lot has been discussed in this time. We've covered quite a lot of issues. It's clear that generally political will is there to support these developments in telementoring and teleconsultation. In some places strategies already exist for these technologies. In other places it will be some time, or the next generation, until those strategies are taken forward. We've seen that communication is very important. It's one thing to have a good idea, but you have to explain to healthcare professionals and also to patients what the benefits are, and that training is another thing. We need the technologies, but we also need to know how to use them. We've seen that the potential for cost savings is seen differently in different countries. Certainly the example of Finland, where there are such big distances, that it's maybe easier to see a very direct way to save costs. But there should be many different ways that they can be saved. One very important point has been the different things that we need before these technologies can really be used generally. We need the right attitude, we need finances, we need collaboration, we need political will, the communication, possibly new laws, and we need to involve the medical professionals and the patients, of course, as well. So lots of things that we've talked about now. Would anybody like to ask a question to all of or to any of our panellists specifically?
Thank you very much. I want to stress the question, if we have the choice, do we have the choice if we implement telementoring and teleconsultation? Mostly the Swedish participants said that there is a trend to specialization. So in the future we won't have specialists in each region, and I think that the patients, you also talk about the patient empowerment. Patients are stronger, they want something. So in the future, we claim for teleconsultation, for the specialized diagnosis and treatment. So I ask you, do you have the choice to implement teleconsultation or not?
Do we have a choice, or is this something that has to happen? Would anybody like to comment?
Based on my opinion is it's something we have to have.
Я думаю, что мы уже не сможем остановить прогресс, и мы должны использовать все, что дает нам технологии для того, чтобы улучшить наш контакт.
I think that we cannot stop the progress, and we should do our best to speak about the contact between the doctor and the patient.
I think that we should make sure of a legal certainty in this field, of specific legal rules, specific legal rules of provision, specific legal rules of liability, civil liability of doctors, civil liability of patients as well. And after we will have this specific legal regulations, we won't have questions whether to use teleconsultation or not.
You could also argue that there is a flip side to this. Being a specialist, for instance, in cardiology, maybe you do not have to move to Lund or live near to a center of excellence in that. It will be easier in the future to actually work with your specialists and actually, be a part of the non-brain drain, actually being able to stay out of regions. So, the physical location and speciality does not have to go hand in hand always.
Does that answer your question, or do you have... Yeah? Okay.
We talked about attitude, the unwillingness of the physician, the doctors to use IT in their clinical daily work. And I just wonder, it would be interesting to hear, has any country integrated e-health in the education of health professionals, the doctors, physicians? Or is there a plan for it, a strategy? Maybe that is a solution for the future.
Okay, yes, so is e-health already part of a physician or a doctor's education, or is it something that happens after they've qualified? And are there any plans to introduce it?
The thing is now under discussion with universities to involve several e-health programs into health teaching programs. We also plan to make huge investments into health literacy promotion. So it's definitely crucial to solve these questions in order we wouldn't face a unwillingness to use ICT technologies in daily work.
Мы в Беларуси активно используем именно эти технологии для обучения. И у нас в Академии нашего постдипломного образования создана платформа, где имеется возможность для всех специалистов различного уровня проконсультировать либо дать информацию для врачей непосредственно практики.
Belarusian medical and postgraduate education has the basement and the very important platform to develop these technologies and to render the information and teleconsultations and telementoring to the specialists, healthcare specialists.
Также мы используем возможности для телекоммуникации во время проведения различных конференций различных республиканского уровня для региона.
We also started using these technologies while arranging Republican medical conferences, and we share this information via ICT.
Это очень хорошо воспринимается нашими врачами и очень хорошо поддерживается нашими ассоциациями врачей, врачей практик.
This initiative is really supported by the healthcare professionals, but also by the associations of doctors and the association of general physicians. This direction is really progressive, and we are to develop it in the further future.
I can just answer that. In Sweden, there are projects both in the education of the new medical students as well as a project to get this out to healthcare professionals, e-health knowledge, basically. But it's not widely rolled out.
Of course, the technologies are usually for some logistical needs for students and residents, also for some booking and their administration functions is some teleconference, but it depends on faculty, it depends on the university. It's not quite important.
In Estonia, we have a theoretical training in curricula for the doctors and nurses, but as it's part of everyday life. All the students see and learn if they have practical training part. But we have for theoretical training also some plans, or universities and medical colleges have some plans. But we try to cover this empty part or the lack of knowledge in such a way if we are implementing some nationwide service or project. Always one part of this project has additional training program for healthcare workers.
I don't know exactly what kind of strategies we have for training personnel. I'm sure that in future this is very important. And maybe some of these people here know better than I what kind of situations something like that.
Yes, I think that we have this kind of education doctors and nurses too. This is the area, and of course this is the area where we have to continue and better this education. I think that we have doctors. For example, our hospital is one and others, and they have rules and they have all this area. So I want to ask one question, if that's okay.
Or are there any more comments on this subject before we move on?
I'm from Sweden here, and I understand from all your interesting comments and answers that you have given us sort of implicit hindering or stopping or slowing down factors from the different countries. But I would like very much if you would just shortly give what are the main hindering factors for the future implementation of consultations and nurturing and other e-health telemedicine activities, so that we know what the work we have to work on when we go back from this conference. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so moving on to a different subject, we can move back later if we need to, but yeah, what is holding us back? What are the main things that could stop us implementing these things in the next few years? Okay.
It's very difficult to answer the conference just after.
Okay. Yes, we'll hopefully have more information about that in the talks later on. But can anybody tell us right now what feelings you get? What are the main things that stand in the way at the moment?
I can handle it. You see the financial issues, the infrastructure development in the countries, the attitudes, the readiness with the public, or the environmental issues, or what is it? Political issues.
I can give it a try. It's a very complex question. I'll give it a try from the Swedish perspective with 20 different counties being responsible. It's a pretty complex process where when you want the solution to work, you have to look at your legal aspects, economical aspects, technological aspects. There are a whole chain of things that has to work. But for one specific county together with one specific vendor, it can be a very tough question to move innovation forward and make all these things work. We're setting up something that we call the welfare lab together with the innovation authority in Sweden right now, where we try to help counties and municipalities to overcome that. So, for instance, when it comes to what do you call that in English? E-hemtjänst.
Yeah.
Elderly care, basically doing that with remote robots that can actually, come and visit you. You can have systems that this is like a night watch, you don't have to walk in the middle of the night to wake people up, etc. There's a city called Västerås in Sweden that has been driving this very intensely for a lot of years, but what they had to do is to go through all kinds of miseries and pain to make this happen. And they have to be kind of very bullish and, you know, persistent to make it happen. And it's not easy to be an innovator in this field. And I think if we want to move forward on a broad scale, we basically need a national political will to be able to move forward. And, you know, it's not easy to do this alone. It has to be done on our scale. It's a very complex question to answer.
It depends on all the factors, and environmental, technological, and really implementing depends on the biggest factor of all the factors.
I think that attitude of healthcare personnel and politicians are very important. Politicians give money. Of course, we need infrastructure and technology. Attitude, very important. It's my opinion.
I think that it's not important that we think the cost effects and money. We need to see big picture. What we need that doctors and nurses and patients have after 10 years. And if we saw that picture, and not only money, then we can do something very important.
Я думаю, что то чувство, которое должно вызвать, это то, что мы идем в ногу с прогрессом.
The main feeling that we should concentrate on that we are going on the way to progress.
Медицина не должна отгораживаться от того, что нам дает технологический прогресс.
We should not build the border between us and the future.
То, что мы будем развиваться в этом направлении, это однозначно не будет на всех.
We are absolutely convinced that these technologies will be developed very soon.
Но как всякое хорошее дело, оно состоит из маленьких кубиков, которые строят здание.
As all good deeds, it is built from really small parts.
И поэтому каждый кирпичик этого здания важен для того, чтобы здание было основательным и имело возможность выполнять свою функцию.
And each part is very important to have a great and huge construction.
Но, наверное, начало – это наша воля и желание строить. Вот это то, что мы должны быть о том, что то, что было сделано в этом проекте и во многих других.
The main feeling that we should have with us at least in the conference is just our willingness to continue, not to stop on what we have.
Что мы являемся теми людьми, которые принесут эти знания в наши страны для того, чтобы развивать это направление.
Thanks to many projects, we have the experience and we have a new command of knowledge that we should spread and implement large-scale territories.
И мы должны работать над различными вопросами, которые позволят построить дальнейшее.
And we should work on small aspects to continue the huge large-scale implementation of the whole line.
Okay, our next question.
Yeah, I'd like to continue on the question of money. In which countries do you have the financial system in place for a purely teleconsultation practice? So saying that the practice that only receives patients electronically and is able to be successful within the current financial system of the country. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody feel they have a financial structure in place to have a purely teleconsultation practice at the moment?
As I already introduced, we have some electronic consultation and some other services and IT costs are also as normal part of our health services financing system, but all the project and development work is financed additionally. And our experience is that we have used EU funds very much and support EU funds aid, and also additionally we have for social insurance fund resources we also invest directly from state budget.
We have a new order of health minister of Lithuania, which is going to come into force on May. And it says that the services of teleconsultation may be reimbursed whether under the agreements between hospitals, whether from the national health insurance budget.
The short answer from Sweden is no, and the project that they were doing, among others from Invest the Bottom, showed very clearly that this has to be agreed within the county itself, which is not the case now. That to make it work naturally, it has to be an agreement between the counties as well, but it's not the case.
As I said before, teleconsultations now just in the project stage, and therefore there is no included in kind of tariffs and other element of consultation in development. But we have experience when some years ago we introduced X-ray data digital storage. We put in tariff specific payment just for the digitalization. And it works very well, and our first providers so much interested to use it. And if this teleconsultation will go forward, and at first legal regulations needed, and after, of course, we'll try to do something.
Okay, yep.
In Finland, Mr. Risikko is over to state, gives money, but I don't know exactly what kind of system developing teleconsultation, maybe some project management. Very important EU projects like this, they get money. Also, people back from all programs.
Данное направление государственной политики, поэтому это деньги государства, но это не исключает использование и различных фондов и других источников, поэтому в любом случае государственная поддержка есть.
This trend is invested and supported financially by the government on the first level, because according to the national program, but also we use the funds, special funds, from which we can have new resources to develop technologies and to land them in the territory.
Okay, thanks. Do we have a question down the front?
Okay, you almost answered my question, but I would like to discuss more about this transnational cooperation. And of course now we have process where we put this work together. Ours meant this network. We have already considered many countries who have done this. We had cooperation many years. How do you see this kind of process? How important are they? And do we need it? Do we need networks? Do we need political discussion between countries or what else?
Okay, how important are these sort of projects? Be very careful how you answer that one. And what else do we need to encourage international cooperation?
Well, I think it's the easiest way to support our national investments by telling that we're investing towards evidence-based solutions. So these kind of projects gives us, well, a feeling when we have some certain evidence-based things which we can apply nationwide, which we can apply in practice.
Okay. Yep.
I add this idea that I think such kind of projects and cross-border collaboration is very important for patients because patients, as you know, in monoline patients, one taking Estonia, the other taking Finland, and never knows when they need healthcare service. And there is very big need for also that health information follows the patient and through such kind of projects we will receive information about the situation in other countries and readiness for cooperation and it's very good starting point for collaboration between countries already on official level and so on.
Безусловно, я тоже считаю, что продолжение проекта должно быть. Почему? Потому что тот фундамент, который был заложен, это только начало. У нас еще очень много проблем, над которыми мы можем работать вместе и разделить наши усилия для того, чтобы достичь определенных результатов.
Of course, this project was just the basement for our future cooperation. We are open for this, and we also can distribute the trends and the directions of our future cooperation. But we are absolutely sure that it's vitally important for all of us.
Именно в личном здравоохранении наши проблемы абсолютно универсальны, поэтому нам легко решать их совместно.
Exactly in the primary healthcare sector, our problems are almost common, and we should concentrate on them and to cope with them and to struggle with them.
И как показала работа в проекте и в предыдущем проекте, и в настоящем проекте, когда мы разделяем какие-то части определенной работы, это дает возможность шире отработать этот проект, и затем он готов уже практически для внедрения новой практики.
When we define the importance and the ways and the top issues for each of the project partners, we could see the line we could have the wider approach to this studying and researching of these problems.
И работа показывает, что та команда, которая была создана в этом проекте, она очень хорошо функционировала и очень хорошо работала. И, конечно, наверное, уже такую сработанную команду просто жалко даже терять.
I'm absolutely sure, and I saw that the team that has been built here in this project has a real strength to continue. And I would be very sorry if we won't continue our cooperation. We do not have to lose time for discussions, we can just go forward.
Okay then. Did you?
Yeah. Just a short remark. I think that it is getting increasingly important for these types of projects, especially in the ICT area, and because what we represent here are very powerful system owners, when one's basically wanting to tell or tell vendors and the industries on what they should deliver to us. But already now, Sweden, for instance, as a market is way too small to make a significant impact in some areas where we are looking for solutions. One example is, for instance, social alarms that elderly people are using when something is wrong. I think we have 200,000 users in Sweden, and typically in the countries that has these rolled out, they are very proprietary systems, also often made in the country, and they're very basic and hard to get the wider functionality out of. If we're going to move towards the next generation, we have to agree in between countries basically that these are standards, this is how these things will have to evolve. And we can never reach that if we're not talking together in actual projects and deciding this is the future vision for a certain kind of ICT technology. So, and it's in these situations that typically those discussions are being started and find a platform to move forward.
Okay, we have time for one more quick question then.
Thank you very much for the interesting perspective. I also very much appreciate your attentiveness of posing convenient questions about finances and insurance, etc. So now I'd like to ask a personal question, if I may. As you represent organizations and high-level, but you are also patients and ready for a sick person or something like that, for example. So I think we all have agreed that in recent decade or in 2 decades we witnessed a tremendous evolution of data transfer in general. Like we at first had let's say simple usual letters, then we had faxes, then we had instant communication like emails, chat, POIP, whatever. So do you ever consider as a patient that that type of data transfer might be implicated in healthcare, which actually might be that the traditional consultation most probably, let's say, will reduce very significantly or even disappear. So would you think that it would be possible from your perspective, from a patient perspective? And if not, or if yes, what are the factors of traditional patient-doctor consultation that you would miss very much? And you think that this is important nowadays and it will still remain very important in the future, even if we have very high, let's say, high-tech data transfer possibilities?
Okay, one quick question. Yeah, so is the traditional doctor's practice going to disappear? And what will we lose if that happens?
I have my non-typical answer to this question. The less we use paper in our daily work, the more ecological problems will be solved.
Поэтому, именно поэтому почему не заменяем этот случай, мы оставим какую-то бумагу, чек.
We will use electronic documentation, of course, but still there will be some necessary reports.
Sorry about that.
I am Henry, a practical doctor, and I think that, of course, everyone needs care, of course needs, but this is possibility to give the answer for problem. And I think that this is not disappeared, this care, if we use some possibility.
Very simple example. Of course, technology is not instead of consultation with real face-to-face doctor. But to my mind, the number of consultations will decrease for certain purpose. Of course, face consultation, doctor will understand what kind of treatment, but to really have some, especially for chronic patients, a lot of just check out consultations, just check out some specific status of patient on some test results and so on. And it is possible just communicate by some technological way or teleconsultation or some email and so on. And in that case, number of consultations will decrease.
I think that the role will evolve rather than absolutely not disappear. If you think about the typical person in the quantified self-thread, when you can, for instance, send off your DNA and get a profile back from one country, for instance the US, you might have a monitor of your ECG and get that interpreted from somewhere else. You collect all kinds of information from the internet, of course, which makes you kind of a hypochondriac, like once studying to be a physician. And the doctor will much more be the coach in all that, trying to help you interpret everything. Because, as you know, when you come to the doctor, being a hypochondriac, you see, I have this, and then it turns out you don't. That kind of coaching role, and then also I think taking much more active part in when you actually need to see a specialist than in today's system where you actually just get the remittance and you move on as a part of the system.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry that not everybody had a chance to ask their questions, but we are limited by time. On behalf of the Prime Care IT